Hi, I'm Jaclyn.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
Welcome back. We hope you guys are having another great week. Maybe in quarantine, maybe not, depending on where in the world you are and how your state or country is handling it. You may be out doing things, or you may still be at home doing nothing like we are, so
yeah.
Hope you're enjoying whatever it is you're doing.
Who knows? Who knows where we'll be when this comes out?
That's true, because we are like a month behind, so...
Ahead?
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you were saying. Like, when this comes out, this was a month ago.
Yes,
But when we're recording this, it's a month ahead.
Yes, I had to stop and think about it for a minute, too, so...
This is off to a great start.
I'm tired, and I wanted to have a beer with dinner, but I didn't because I was afraid I was going to fall asleep after dinner, so I waited until we started recording to have my beer, so I'll be ready to fall asleep by the time we finish, so...
Yeah. I yelled to Kevin, make me a rum and coke, and I don't think he heard me.
It's very sad.
And I'm really sad. And so maybe a month later or a year later, whenever Kevin decides to listen to this, he'll just bring me a rum and coke.
Yeah, he'll be like, oh, you remember that time when you recorded that podcast a couple years ago? Here's your rum and coke.
I got it for you.
Yeah, we had to wait a few minutes to record because Andrew wanted to make a blackberry margarita, so, he has to muddle his blackberries and cut up his lime and get out his shaker, and it's a whole ordeal. It's not just a quick little...
It's a whole production.
Yeah. And it's really hot in this room, as it always is. Always, but especially so when we record at night. But last time, Courtney had a great idea that I should just run a fan in here for like a couple hours beforehand. Maybe like help cool it off. Obviously, I have to turn it off when we start recording, or that's all you would hear. So it did not work. It did not cool off the room. But what it did do was suck up all the smell from my cat's litter box and just blow it into the rest of the room. So
that's what she's smelling. Just, think about that. That's what's going on.
The other day, I wanted to see how hot it was in my house, so I brought out my meat thermometer and just, held it in the air, which I don't know if that's completely accurate, but I feel like it would be fairly accurate.
Yeah, mostly.
And it was 83 degrees, and I'm sure this room is probably a couple of degrees hotter than the kitchen was.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, my parents' AC went out last night, and my mom was, freaking out. She was like, well, okay, also, let me, take it back a bit. So, when my parents, had to buy a new AC unit, my dad was like, okay, I have to get, a good AC for this house. I'm going to spend the big bucks and get the good AC.
Mm-hmm.
And all they ever have is problems out of it. Literally. It's constantly not working. It's constantly broken. They're constantly, one time, one of the guys showed up and was like, oh, yeah, when they said this house, I knew what it was. And then, at one point, and this is, years after, they were like, yeah, this house wasn't meant for this unit or whatever. And they're like, then why did you install it?
Right? You're like, why would you let us get this AC unit that's not meant for this house? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but we went, golfing this morning, and my mom was like, I swear. She was like, if it's 95 degrees in there, I'm calling. Because apparently, even though their thing is under warranty, if somebody was going to come out on the weekend, they had to pay $150.
What?
Even though it's under warranty, and they've done everything, yeah. So they didn't do it, and so they were waiting, and she was like, if it's 95, I'm calling. If it's 90, I'm calling. And then she was like, Dan, what degree do you think it should be before we call? She kept lowering it. Yeah, and she's like, I'm going to go to a hotel. I'm not doing it. So, but she said when they got back, they could, restart it, and it was, starting to cool it off, which it was, starting when it has been, blistering hot and humid here, disgustingly. So it was trying to cool it off, but yeah, it was so funny because she was like, if it's 90, if it's 80, Dan, what degrees do you think? I think it should, if it's anything above 75.
That's funny. Yeah, we went to the state park today and went for a hike that we kind of got lost and went a little farther than we meant to, which seems to be our norm now, but...
yeah, I'm never going on a hike with you because you're going to be like, it's 2 miles, and then 8 miles later.
I just want to say, this time was Andrew's quote-unquote fault, because he was like, oh, well, let's take this extra trail that I'm pretty sure leads back here. And I was like, okay, and it did, but it was one of those, basically you had no idea where you were until you literally came upon the car, and you're like, oh, we made it back. There were no signs to be we're almost there. So it's 3 miles in, I'm like, I don't know if we're close or if we're going to have to turn around and walk this whole 3 miles back to our car.
Yeah.
So, But after we got home, and then I walked down to the library because I hate myself, I guess, because it's 100 degrees. But then after I got home and took a shower, I just laid in my bed where I have the window unit. So that was nice. And I'm wishing it was in here right now. And it's a good thing this is a podcast and not a video because I'm recording this naked. So
there you go, listeners. There's a mental image for you. And I'm currently in leggings and a jacket because I have my AC set to like 63 because I like my house to feel like a morgue. So.
And I'm very jealous right now. Which, by the way, my video is turned up. Courtney's not just looking at me naked.
Yeah,
which...
I can just see her face, but I've seen it all before, guys, so.
Exactly. I'm like, not that it would really matter if she did anyway, but, you know.
And if you want to become a Patreon member, want to be one of our tiers, we'll be... And I'm just kidding. We're not going to be putting news on the internet, guys. I'm just kidding.
Nope. If you ever see one, we did not put it out there. Please notify us.
Yes, for real. I have a sketchy ex-boyfriend, so please let me know.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, I guess we're ready to hop on in.
Yes, we are.
Courtney, you know what I realized?
What's that?
So this episode is our first really true caffeinated crimes episode.
It is. It is our first caffeine-related episode.
Yes, so that's super exciting. Alright, so everyone has heard of the infamous case in which a woman spills a cup of hot coffee on herself while driving away from McDonald's, sues McDonald's, and wins $1 million, right? So this is the case that got those caution hot stickers stamped on all to-go coffee mugs across the country. But are the details of this case what you really think they are?
Probably not, since we're doing an episode on it.
Yes. If you're like, oh, nope, I know them all. Well, maybe there's something you don't know, so just listen anyway.
Yeah.
So we got most of our information from the HBO Hot Coffee documentary, as well as from tortmuseum.org and caoc.org. 79-year-old Stella Liebeck was in the passenger seat of her grandson's car when they went through the McDonald's drive-thru in Albuquerque, New Mexico on February 27th, 1992. So after they went through the drive-thru, he pulled into a parking spot so that his grandmother Stella could put cream and sugar in her coffee. So in the car that they were in, there were no cup holders in the car, and there were also no like smooth surfaces. So like the dashboard was like slanted, like there was nowhere to sit her coffee on. So she puts the coffee between her legs to take off the lid, put the cream and sugar in. So as she's doing this, she ends up spilling the coffee on her lap. So as she is opening the lid of the coffee, she spills it all over her lap. She was wearing sweatpants, which absorbed the liquid and like held it against her skin. So she immediately jumps out of the car and is just like trying to like rip her pants off because it's like burning through her pants, burning onto her skin. Her grandson tried to wrap a sheet around her that he had like in the back of his car, and she started feeling really faint and nauseous, which they later would find out that her body had gone into shock. So he drove her to the ER. Now, remember, this is the case where this woman just drives away and spills her coffee and sues McDonald's for it. Okay. She had burns on over 16% of her body, 6% of which were third-degree burns, including on her thighs and her genitals. The skin was completely burned away, exposing the muscle underneath. She was hospitalized for 8 days, where she received skin grafts and other surgeries. This wasn't in the documentary, which is the most reliable source that I found, but I have found it on the internet, so I wanted to include it, but also say that it may just be legend, I don't know. But some sources say that they had to separate her labia from her thigh because the coffee had melted them together.
And anyone who's a coffee or tea drinker or anything hot drinker, I'm sure we've all spilled coffee on ourselves before, and this has not happened.
No. Okay. So think about if she had put this liquid directly into her mouth, driving away from the drive-thru. Like, I mean, most people are like, oh, okay, this is kind of hot, I'm going to blow on it and give it a minute, but you wouldn't expect to get third-degree burns from it. Like, oh, I burned my tongue and now I can't taste anything all day. Not, I need to be in a hospital for 8 days and have all these major surgeries.
Yeah, because if she drank that, I mean, her mouth probably would have burnt off.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think of Kevin, who, like, immediately, as soon as he gets his coffee, he just takes a big sip, doesn't care. And I'm like, oh, is it hot? And he's like, it's fine. And then I'm like,
yep.
It's hot, it's hot, it's hot. I'm a baby. I don't like super hot drinks. But
Yeah.
like Kevin would be the person who would just like take a sip of it, and like if he'd gotten this coffee, like his tongue and mouth would probably be so burnt.
Yes. Yeah. Like I said, she was in the hospital for 8 days, and the doctors didn't even want to release her then, but she couldn't afford any more medical bills to stay there even longer. So basically the 8-day point was when they were like, okay, I guess we can send you home, but she's still like returning to the doctors every few days to have these burns taken care of, to, you know, make sure that her skin grafts are healing. By the way, you can find all of these pictures on the internet. We're probably not going to put them on Instagram because they're a bit graphic for what we normally post, but if you Google it, they're all out there so you can really see how horrific these burns were.
It's horrible. Like, if you Google it, just be prepared. It's, like, bad.
Yes, it's very graphic. And again, she's 79 years old. So Stella Liebeck nearly died from her injuries of the 3rd-degree burns from this coffee. And it would take her more than 2 years to fully recover. And even then, she never really got back, like, the stamina that she had before her injuries. So Stella and her family wrote a letter to McDonald's asking them to reimburse her for $20,000 for the medical expenses that her insurance wouldn't cover. Now, for our listeners who are not in the United States, who have trouble comprehending that we have a for-profit medical system, the average cost of birthing a baby in the United States is $11,000. And that's with no complications. That's just like a normal birth, that's going to be your average cost.
Yeah.
Like, that's what a lot of people pay out of pocket to bring a child into this world. So if you're hearing, wow, she sued for $20,000 for medical expense, that's probably exactly what her insurance would not cover.
Yeah. For real. And, like, an ambulance ride is, like, $10,000, even if it's, like, across the street. Like,
yeah, it's insane. So I do have details of exactly what her expenses were that she was asking for. But, again, just wanted to put that in there that this is 100% accurate. And so in her letter that her daughter and her son-in-law helped her write, she offered to send copies of her medical bills, which at that time included over $10,000 of out-of-pocket expenses. So that's what she has already incurred. And estimates of the continued treatments and care that she would need in the future. So she's estimating the total cost of what this injury is going to cost to her. So again, she's not suing them at this point. She's writing a letter, she's explaining what happened, and she's asking for them to please cover these expenses. And in their letter, they also asked McDonald's to check the coffee machine at that location to make sure it wasn't faulty and set to a much higher temperature than it should be, because again, you would never expect to get a cup of coffee and receive these severe burns from it. And in the letter, she also asked that if it was McDonald's policy to serve coffee this hot, that they reevaluate those policies to prevent this from happening in the future. So McDonald's responded to Stella's letter and offered her a whopping $800.
$800. That's it.
Like, your hospital food cost would probably end up $800 in 5 days in the United States. Just want to put that out there. Like, that's nothing. So Stella did end up taking McDonald's to court, and she tried twice more to settle out of court because she's like, I'm not looking for a payday. I'm not trying to make any money. All I want is for you to pay these expenses that I'm having to pay because I was so severely burned by this coffee. But McDonald's refused at all of her attempts. So then eventually she did sue them, and they did end up going through a trial. And she also wanted McDonald's to change their policies so that no one else would have to suffer the way that she did. So that was the other part of the court case, was we want you to reevaluate these policies.
That kind of makes me think, I know Taco Bell recently, by recently, within the last few years, I don't know, time doesn't exist anymore, like, they got sued because a lady was saying that, like, their meat wasn't up to standard or whatever, but I know she was like, I'm not suing for, like, she wasn't asking for, like, any money. Yeah. She was like, I just want you to make sure you're serving, like, good products.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. But, I mean, it's like the media does, where they just twist things into the most interesting story.
Yeah.
So it was revealed in the trial that at that time, which was the early 90s, McDonald's operation manual required them to hold their coffee at 180 to 190 degrees Fahrenheit. So by holding the coffee, we don't mean the temperature that it is to brew the coffee, but the temperature that it stays until it's poured and then handed to the customer. Because obviously it's going to need to be a little bit hotter to make the coffee than just like the temperature that you would want it sitting at. And so the 180 to 190 degree holding temperature was 30 to 40 degrees hotter than other coffee shops in the area at the time were serving their coffee. And just for reference, 212 degrees is boiling temperature. So you could be getting coffee from McDonald's that's 20 degrees less than literally boiling, and it's expected to be able to put in your mouth.
Yeah.
And like Courtney was saying earlier, if you are a coffee, tea, any kind of hot beverage drinker, we've all spilled it on ourselves. So here's where the difference comes in. So at 180 degrees, coffee can cause third-degree burns in as little as 3 seconds. That's not even enough time to wipe it off of you. Versus serving coffee at 160 degrees, which may not seem like a huge difference. I mean, it's only 20 degrees lower, but it was within what other coffee places were serving. It takes around 20 seconds for coffee to cause third-degree burns. That's a lot of time. If you spill coffee all over yourself, 20 seconds is a lot of time to get it off of you before it causes these burns. So that, sometimes if you hear that, 30 to 40 degree, maybe that's a huge difference in terms of what it takes to burn you.
I mean, 3 seconds, that's not even enough time for me to think to, like, even recognize, like, I'm being burned.
Yeah.
That's literally, like,
exactly.
1, 2, 3, you have third-degree burns. Like, that's fast.
And I don't know how, like, I've never been severely burned, so I can't speak from that perspective, but I know sometimes, like, super severe injuries, you don't even feel immediately. Like, it's obviously later when, like, you have all the pain. Like, I know for me personally, when I was 10 years old, I crashed my bicycle into a barbed wire fence, so I split my leg open and ended up getting 19 stitches. I didn't feel pain until I got to the hospital. So, I didn't even, which, of course I was 10 and dumb, so I'm like, oh, Mom, like, I don't know, do I need to go to the hospital? And, of course, she's, like, seeing my leg hanging open, but, I had to look down to, I was basically, checking myself, did I hurt myself? And I'm like, oh, my leg is flapping open, because I just literally felt nothing. So,
yeah, that adrenaline kicks in where you're like,
yeah,
nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So 3 seconds isn't even enough to realize that, you've burned yourself, basically. So from 1982 to 1992, when Stella was burned, McDonald's coffee burned more than 700 people. And this is just the number of people that actually, reported it to McDonald's, so that it was severe enough that they felt the need to report it.
Yeah.
And during the trial, McDonald's admitted that coffee is not fit for consumption immediately upon purchasing it, because it's so hot and it could cause severe scalds or burns if consumed immediately.
Even when I, make coffee in a coffee pot or my Keurig, it is never that hot.
No.
Even if I take a sip, right away, I'll be like, ooh, that's hot. But it's not, that hot where it's it is not safe to consume this.
Yes. Exactly. This isn't normal. And McDonald's admitted that consumers are not made aware of the danger that could be caused to them if their coffee is spilled on them at the temperature that they served it at. So again, if you remember I said in the beginning, this was the case that got those little caution hot stickers on all of the to-go coffee cups that I personally know a lot of people make fun of because they're like, oh, obviously coffee is hot, but that was part of the stipulation of people need to be warned that this is not ready to be consumed as soon as you get it.
Yeah.
Because there was nothing like that in place before. And again, why would you think that a food product that you were purchasing is not ready for you to immediately consume it?
Yeah. This also is a complete sidebar, but it makes me think of a McDonald's coffee story that one time Kevin and I were driving back from Baltimore, super late at night, we were leaving at 9 p.m. for an 8-hour drive. And so we stop at McDonald's for dinner and we get coffee. And so Kevin gets a hot coffee and the lady was super spacey. We paid and she almost didn't give us our food. She was just weird. So then Kevin takes a sip of the coffee and he was like, oh my God, it was ice cold. And it was supposed to be hot coffee. So somebody messed that up. But just hearing the story about the hot coffee, you're not supposed to consume it, and him taking a sip, and it was the coldest coffee. Sorry, guys. Super sidebar.
Somebody took that way too far. They're like, I'm not going to get sued again. I'm just going to serve it ice cold. Perfect.
You should have just put ice in it and made it a nice coffee at this point.
Right. And so at the trial, the attorney for McDonald's said that they had a very good reason for serving coffee at this temperature because it's what the customers wanted. And claimed that basically that temperature was necessary for brewing and maximum flavor. So basically we did a customer survey and they want it hotter because when it's brewed hotter, it has a better flavor. So that's why we serve it at a temperature that can give you third-degree burns if you spill a little bit on you.
Yeah, that's weird because I'm like, I feel like if it's so hot, wouldn't it just taste like burnt?
Doesn't it burn it?
Like it tastes like burnt coffee, like burnt flavors. Like
yeah,
that's weird.
I don't understand that. But yeah, they claimed that they did a survey and that customers wanted it this hot. Okay. Oh gosh. I forgot I'm naked.
Yeah, you're naked. I know you leaned up and I was just like, whoop.
If we choose to leave any of that in, which we may not, but if we do, I just went to let my cat in and forgot that I'm naked and just put my whole boob in the screen for Courtney. So I don't really understand this whole concept of, oh, well, the customers wanted it that way, so we had to do it. I'm sure there's all kinds of things that people want that you can't legally do because it's unsafe. Like, especially...
And that's the thing, too, is it's like, in the survey, did you say, do you want us to brew it hotter because it'll taste better? Where you're, like, telling people it will taste better and not necessarily having them, like, sample coffees brewed at different temperatures, you know? Like...
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. Like, what kind of survey was this? Was this, like, a survey just, like, on a computer that, like, means nothing?
Yeah, like, how did this come to be? And that was a big thing that came out of this trial as well, is, like, look, consumers aren't even made aware of the fact that this is hot enough to burn them to such a degree. So that's where, like, all of these warnings came from and all that good stuff.
But yes, so the jury did award Stella $200,000 for pain and suffering and medical costs, but it was reduced to $160,000 because they determined her to be at 20%, which is very specific, fault for the incident because she spilled the coffee on herself, not an employee spilling it on her. Or like a faulty cup that led to the spill. So Stella never challenged that it was her fault, but that like a spill like this should not result in third-degree burns and a minimum 8-day stay at the hospital. Like multiple surgeries, this shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
They also awarded her $2.7 million in punitive damages, which, to put this in perspective, in 2 days, McDonald's, just in coffee sales alone, makes $2.7 million.
Yes.
Just not your Big Mac, not your sweet tea, not your French fries, just in their coffee in 2 days.
Yeah.
Clearly they had the money.
And this was at this point, I think it was 1994 by the time they went to trial. I'm pretty sure iced coffee wasn't even a thing then. So, like,
yeah.
Now they have, like, McCafe where they have, like, all kinds of, quote, coffee beverages. Like, this is just plain hot coffee in their sales. But that's how the jury did come to that number, because they're like, oh, okay, we'll pick 2 days worth of their coffee sales. So that's how they came up with that number.
Yeah. And because I also looked it up because I was like, wow, is that like, because that's a hard number for me to like wrap my head around, like, wow, that's a lot of money in 2 days. Yeah. And I looked it up, and today, and this is like a rough estimate because I didn't click on any of the articles, I just looked on the outside, but it was like estimated that a day McDonald's makes like $75 million in sales.
Wow.
In 1 day. So.
Wow.
But there you go. So now I want some McDonald's. Anyway, punitive damages are very rare and are intended to change the behavior of the party accused of wrongdoing in the future. And so the trial judge, I guess, decided $2.7 million was just too much and reduced it to $480,000, which is a huge reduction.
Big reduction.
Big reduction. And Stella and McDonald's settled privately, but it's reported that she received less than $500,000. Yep. And again, she did not care about the money, but at this point, she had to take them to court for them to even acknowledge her. And a jury found that she should be given this money, and McDonald's was just like, okay, goodbye.
Yep. Like, she asked for $20,000. That's it.
Yeah. And this case was really widely misreported with news stations claiming this old lady spills a cup of coffee, and so then she's upset because she hurt herself because she spilled her coffee, and so then she gets $1 million, and she didn't know coffee would be hot. That's why companies put the caution hot product, like, note on their products, and, like, everyone was like, this is just so ridiculous. But they didn't say, like, this woman had third-degree burns, and McDonald's admitted the coffee was too hot. Like,
Yeah.
that's a big deal.
They're just like, oh, this old lady just spilled some coffee on herself and was like, oh, wait, it's hot. I need some money. Like, that's not what happened. Like,
yeah.
So, obviously, I was not alive when this case first happened, but, like, I remember growing up and, like, my parents talking about it and talking about how ridiculous it was that this old lady just, like, got a ton of money because she spilled some coffee on herself, and it was, like, a big joke. Like, I clearly remember this. Like, the first time I learned about the actual details of this case, like, it just, like, blew my mind because everyone knows this case, but most people know it so differently. And obviously at that time, the internet's not a huge thing, so what you hear on the news stations that are being reported on your TV is what you think is true, and you don't have any way to evaluate those sources or get, other information easily like we do today, where you can get accurate information all over the place.
Yeah, because, and I think we do that often, too, where, like, Kevin and I will see a sign that's, like, something that's kind of, like, very specific. You know what I mean? Like, you're at a park and it was, like, falling off the top of this can result in injury. Or, like, don't lick the pole. And you're like, wow, I wonder, like, what idiot did this thing that they have to include it. And I think that was a lot of, like, this whole case is they're like, well, we got to put caution hot on there because some lady didn't know it was going to be mildly warm for her hot coffee.
Yeah.
But that's not, like, the truth. So,
yes.
News reports also were saying she was trying to put cream and sugar in her coffee while holding it between her legs while she was driving. So not that she was in the passenger seat, not any of that. Mm-hmm. And they just kept blaming her for the situation, saying this was her fault. And, like Jaclyn said, it just became a huge joke, especially in late night TV and talk shows. And Stella received a lot of hate mail because, if you're hearing about this woman who's suing McDonald's for, like, spilling hot coffee on herself, you think it's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. But if you know the details, but, it sounds ridiculous. So she received a lot of hate mail. She did eventually die in 2004 at 91 years old. And in 2009... country music singer Toby Keith did release a song called American Ride. And in this song, there's a line that says, spill a cup of coffee, make $1 million. So he's even, this is 2009. At this point, it's like, 20 years after the case almost?
Yeah, like, the internet's out there. You can find that this isn't accurate.
Yeah, and so he was using this as an example of what's wrong with America, not the fact that Toby Keith exists is the problem with America. Oh, that was race satire. Okay. But still, like, it's just further, like, continuing this case. And Stella's daughters are even like, why do we have to just keep reliving this over and over again? Like, why do you have to keep bringing this up? And you're bringing it up inaccurately. Like, the real facts of this story are available. We'll tell you. Like, just stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, they've had to witness all of the physical pain and suffering that their mom went through with this ordeal, as well as, like, just being basically bullied on national TV for the remaining years of her life. And at this point, she's been dead for 5 years, and, like, people are still making jokes about her, and obviously you're going to hear this and see this everywhere. Like, imagine if that was someone that you love that had suffered so horribly by something, and then everyone just jokes about it, like, in, like, TV and music, and people that you have, it's not like one person that made, like, an off comment that you're like, oh, actually, like, you didn't know better, let me educate you. Like, how many people does this have to go through, and not one person is like, oh, wait a minute, this is actually wrong?
Because I think one of the first places I also heard about this, too, was a show called Adam Ruins Everything. Mm-hmm. So it made me think about it when you were like, someone says it, and it's like, well, actually, because that's his whole show is someone says something wrong, and he's like, actually, here's a bunch of facts saying you're wrong. And so it talks about this, how it was like, it was completely misconstrued and completely wrong, and people to this day still don't know, like, the true story behind that case, which just shows how good McDonald's lawyers and PR people are. They literally got it, they admitted they were wrong, knew they were wrong, and still got it twisted that they weren't wrong.
Yeah. And if you're hearing this and you knew about this case, but this is the first time that you've heard, like, the actual details, please write in and let us know, because maybe we just think that there are still people out there that, maybe most people know this by now, but I know I still, obviously, if in 2009 Toby Keith is writing a song about it, no one on his team is aware of it, so please let us know if you guys learned something new, because we'd like to know that.
Yeah, definitely. And the new handbook at McDonald's does require coffee to be served between 170 and 180 degrees. And this case really became like the poster child for tort reform, which included laws that would limit citizens' abilities to take corporations to court and put caps on damages that could be awarded, which is just the American way of helping rich people,
Yes.
basically.
That's exactly what tort
is
reform
we're going to
is.
We're going to protect, I'm going to leave all that in. We're going to protect the rich people, and citizens who are just trying to bring awareness or get their medical bills covered cannot do so.
Yes.
So legislation did pass in the Senate, but President Bill Clinton did veto it. Then the American Tort Reform Association was formed in 1986 by 300 major corporations to limit the liability of corporations. So they hired a PR firm to create groups called Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse. And the tobacco industry funded a lot of it, because you know the tobacco industry's getting some lawsuits.
They're like, we don't want anybody suing us. We'll be a part of this. Here's all this money.
Yeah. They're like, we've told you for years it's killing you. Don't come at us. So it was designed to kind of look like a grassroots organization started by citizens, but it was actually just these huge PR firms of major corporations creating these to make it look like citizens agreed with it, when it was really just the PR companies and major corporations again.
Yes.
So they really started pushing state legislators to pass the tort reform in individual states, since it didn't pass like at the federal level. And another, quote, frivolous lawsuit cited by these groups, a man in LA was hit by a drunk driver while talking on the phone in a phone booth, and he sued the telephone company. And this was even reported by President Reagan on national TV, and just like, oh, it's so ridiculous, like, you're just in the wrong place, wrong time. But the actual...
Like, they're using all of these, like, lawsuits as examples of this is why we need tort reform, because look, this poor telephone company is getting sued because a drunk driver hit their phone booth. Look how ridiculous this is. This is why you guys should vote for tort reform to limit people from suing corporations like this.
But if they had fact-checked, which everyone should do, just because it's on Facebook doesn't mean it's true, everyone should do, but the actual facts were that the door of the phone booth got stuck and he was unable to open it. So he sees the car coming and he cannot get out. So he's literally stuck in this phone booth.
Yeah.
And this phone booth was at a really, really busy intersection, and multiple people had been hit at it before.
Yeah.
He was not the first person. So it just kind of goes back to where, I mean, even President Reagan's on TV talking about how ridiculous it is, and they just don't have their facts right. And I think that's a problem a lot of time with media, is they'll just, whatever makes them money,
yes,
they'll do. And whatever gets anybody on a cause, whatever pushes their agenda, they will report.
Yes.
So, President George W. Bush was super big on tort reform, claimed many good doctors were just being pushed out because of medical liability lawsuits, and he really wanted to put limits on the ability to sue for medical malpractice and put caps on those damages. So Colin Gorley had suffered brain damage at birth due to the negligence of the doctor, and the doctor had previously been sued twice and settled for medical malpractice. So the family sued for $6 million, which is what they estimated to be the lifetime expense of caring for their son. And then the jury did award them $5.6 million, but because of the caps in place, it was reduced to $1.25 million. Again, a huge drop.
Yes. So basically they said after all of their lawyer, court costs, taxes, all of that, they're like, we got like around $500,000.
Yeah.
And so they're like, we basically sued, basically their son's permanent brain damage is from the malpractice of this doctor. So they're suing her to be able to care for their son for the rest of his life. So not only are they having to spend the time and the expense to care for him as long as they're alive, once they pass away, who's going to care for him then? Like, he's going to have to go into a home, or he's going to have to stay with another family member. He was a twin, so I mean, maybe his twin brother, but like, someone else is going to have to take on the expense of caring for this child, and now you got $500,000, which in the medical world is literally nothing. Like,
yeah, nothing.
Especially with all of his multiple surgeries and therapies and things like that. Like, that's not even going to cover a year's worth of, like, medical expenses for this child.
Yeah. And I mean, again, this is them not asking for anything unreasonable. They're just asking for money to take care of their son. And so, of course, now their son is on Medicaid, and so the taxpayers are paying for his care, not the doctor responsible. So when you're mad about where your tax dollars are going, well, it should have been paid for already, but here we go.
Yeah.
So, now that I'm on my little high horse over here, mandatory arbitration clauses, they prohibit individuals from suing a company in criminal or civil court and instead force you to go through secret arbitration proceedings with an arbitration judge of the company's choice.
Interesting.
And so, you know, like...
So this happens a lot in, like, employer contracts. So if you are... signing on to be like a contracted employee with somebody, they're like, oh, if you ever have any issues with us, you can't sue us in a court of law. You have to go through our arbitration proceedings. So basically, you lose your rights to be able to hold someone criminally and civilly responsible for something that may happen to you on the job, and instead have to go through their secret arbitration proceedings, which, like Courtney said, means that they get to pick the judge. So obviously the judge is going to have some kind of interest in why else would this company pick that specific judge.
Yeah.
And that also means that previous arbitration settlements are kept secret. So you don't know if this employee that you're signing a contract with has settled out of court with 8 other employees for being hurt on the job, because that's kept secret, because you lose all of these rights. So, like, mandatory arbitration clauses are just another thing that was embedded into tort reform.
Yeah, so basically, the rich keep getting richer, and the poor, if you are injured, especially at the hands of someone else that is rich, you're screwed.
Yeah.
But this is the story, the true facts of the hot coffee case, the true reason when anytime you eat a coffee, it says caution hot, and hopefully the reason that you're not getting burnt by McDonald's coffee and in the hospital for a long time with a lot of surgeries. So,
yes.
Yeah, that is the case.
That is the case. That is our first true caffeinated crimes. So that's kind of exciting, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's a little bit shorter episode this week. We've done a kind of few heavy cases in a row. So not that this one's not heavy, but no one died, so that's always a plus.
Nobody was like stalked,
yes.
Or I don't know. Some of the heavy hitters.
Yeah, like she did, quote, get justice. I mean, obviously this woman went through so much, but, you know, people did recognize that, and she was able to get something for her pain and suffering. So it's a little bit lighter than some of our other stories where there's just no justice. So, yeah. So, Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
My perk of the week is my Kindle. So...
That's a good one.
I got it as, like, I had a Kindle in the past. It was very old. It was, like, first generation.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't even connect to the internet Kindle. Like,
yep.
You had to just plug it up. And so this Christmas, I asked for a new Kindle. And I was like, oh, well, I hope I use it, you know, whatever. And then COVID-19 came knocking on America's door. And the libraries closed. And it wasn't as easy to go to bookstores. And so I've been using my Kindle a lot, especially with, like, my library's ebooks and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've just constantly had books to read. And I stayed up the other night reading Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. Have you read it?
That sounds familiar.
Georgia recommended it on My Favorite Murder recently.
I don't think I've read it. I think it's on my list to read.
So I love Karen Slaughter. I've read a few of her books. They're really good. They're fiction, but they kind of read like true crime. Like, they have that true crime feel. And so this one finally came available, and I was like, I'm going to read it. And literally one night I stayed up until like 12:30 reading it, and then stayed up till like 1:30 because I kept hearing noises in my apartment, and Kevin was asleep. And I was sitting there like, Kevin, somebody's going to break in and kill us. But that book was very good. I definitely recommend. And I've been reading a lot of Ellen Hilderbrand. Mm-hmm. Well, I hope that's how you pronounce it. But I'm reading a lot of her books. Now I want to go to Nantucket. But
yes,
I've had all these books because of my Kindle. I'm so thankful for it. I'd be lost without it. I have a bunch of physical books I need to read, but I love my Kindle, and I love the new books. So that is my perk of the week. Jaclyn, what is your perk of the week?
My perk of the week is the Babysitter's Club series on Netflix. So, I was obsessed with the Babysitter's Club books as a kid. I can't say I've read all of them because there's like over 100, so I'm sure there are some that I missed, especially because it wasn't like I could just go on Amazon and be like, oh, click, 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 let me order all the ones I don't have. It's like, oh,
you can't go to all these sources now that give you like a detailed list of every single book.
Yes. So it's like, oh, let me go to this library this week and this library next week and just gather all the ones that I can. Like, I just remember my Nana and I would go to the library at least once a week, especially during the summer when I would get like 8 books and like take them all home and read them in like 2 days. But I just like can so distinctly remember just like standing in the library, like looking through all the Babysitter's Club titles, like, is there a new one that I haven't read yet? Like, okay. And so like just like the whole like franchise, like I just love them so much. And so I saw that they were putting the series out on Netflix and I was like, okay, like I'll watch it, but I mean there's so many remakes that are just not great. So I was like, well, I'll probably like it for like nostalgia's sake and like, you know, whatever. But no, like I legit love it so much. Like it's like it has the nostalgia, but it's also like a new fresh story, but they don't like modernize it too much, because that was like my main fear. I was like, they're gonna have like an app that parents use and it's just gonna be like cheesy, you know?
Yeah.
But they didn't do that at all, and they just did it so perfect, but they also just made it more like inclusive, and it's just fantastic. So if you haven't watched it yet, just stop this podcast right now and just go watch all, I think it's like 10 episodes. They're like 30 minutes each. But they're fantastic. It's so worth it.
Yeah. I haven't watched it. I think I somehow skipped over the Babysitter's Club when I was reading as a kid.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think we've ever talked about this, so I don't think you read them.
I don't think I read them. I think a lot of my problem when I was a kid is I had a sister who was 5 years older than me, and I wanted to do everything she did. So a lot of like the stuff like people my age like I didn't watch like the Hilary Duff one.
Oh, Lizzie McGuire.
Lizzie McGuire. Yeah. Like everyone's always like, oh my gosh, Lizzie McGuire remake, and I'm like, oh, I never watched that as a kid. Like so many things that I think it's because I was just like, I have to be my sister. So I was always like 5, like up there. So there's a lot of stuff I missed in that little bubble.
Well, I'm surprised that Ashton didn't read the Babysitter's Club, because they came out in like the 80s, so like that would have been like still in her.
Maybe she did. I don't know. I mean, maybe I read them. There's so much of my childhood I don't remember. I do remember loving the treehouse ones, like where they would go to different things, like Lincoln at whatever. You know, it was like all those, like Titanic at Twilight.
Yeah. Did you read the Boxcar Children?
I don't think I read that either.
Oh my gosh, I loved the Boxcar Children. And then like my mom saved like all of her like childhood books, so like Trixie Belden and like the Hardy Boys and all of these like older like I would say like young adult, like, because young adult I feel like is older. Like I feel like these were more like pre-teeny kind of books, you know?
Yeah, they're in like the library's like children section or young readers, I think is what we call it.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like not quite, because like young adult I feel like there's a lot of talk about like sex and like, you know, like things like that, versus just it's like more pure innocent times. And you know,
my old boss loved the Trixie books. She has like this group of friends, like every year they have like a Trixie conference, and so they pick like a new city. Like I think one year they went to like New Orleans, and then one year they go all these different places and they meet up because they all just love Trixie and they love all that. And she's a children's librarian, and she like orders basically all the children's books for the whole system in my county. But she's like, I always make sure in our branch like the Trixie books are here.
I love it.
And there was like one little girl who she recommended them to her, and like the girl loved them, and it made my boss like so happy. She's like, oh, I'm so happy that like you love this, like this generation too can like enjoy it. Like so I know I've been wanting to read like Little House on the Prairie again, because I remember reading those books. Like I always just want to read like some of the books I read when I was a kid and be like, is this as like cute and fun as I remember? Or
I know, I'm like, I can't wait till like I have a kid that I can like read these books to and not just be like a weirdo reading like children's books, you know?
Which makes me think, because Kevin and I went to the store like in person for the first time today in like a month and a half. We've been doing like pickup basically, And now I understand why Laura was so excited to go with Pa to town, because I was literally in there and I was like, Kevin, look at this. And he's like, what'd you do with that? I don't know. And then when I'm looking, I'm like, here's coffee infused barbecue sauce. That's pretty cool. I don't know. And I'm like, look at this. And he's like, I have nothing to make with this. I don't know what this is. Right. Like, what is?
I don't know.
Is
but
it
I need
sweet?
all these
Is it
things.
spicy? Is it salty? I don't know. I'm just gonna buy it. So I had a little bit of a moment there where I was like, oh, this is so cool. Look at all this stuff.
Yeah, our libraries opened back up like in person this week. Like they've been open, I think like 2 weeks now, doing like curbside pickups. Like you can like put in an order and stuff, but they're actually like open now. So I had to go get a book for the case that we're doing tomorrow, which would be next week for you guys. But so I went to go get a book for that, and so I was like sitting in the car, so I had my mask, and I'm like, okay, Jaclyn, you're gonna go in, you're gonna get this one book, and you're gonna check out, and you're gonna leave. You can't touch all the books, you can't be all over everything. And it was really tough because it's so hard. Of course, I ended up browsing and getting another book too, but it's so hard to browse books and not just like touch everything. But I succeeded, and I just turned my little head sideways and read the titles,
just
and then
pull your phone out and Google
book.
the name. Okay, what is this about?
Yes.
Yeah, because I know
Yes.
our libraries, I haven't been back in person. They just all fully opened up, but they have like a cart where they're like, if you pull a book off the shelf and look at it, don't put it back, put it on this cart. We have to like hold it in the back for 3 days. Like, so yeah.
Yep, ours had the same thing, and then they had like a little thing that was like, basically when you return your books, like we immediately just like put them away for 3 days. So if you return it like on the day that it's due, like it may say that it's late, which our library doesn't have any late fees because they're wonderful. But they're basically like, if you look at your account and it says that your book was returned late, like that's probably why you're fine. Just basically we're not going to touch them for 3 days after you return them. So that helps. So you feel a little bit safer getting a book out as well. And of course everyone there has a mask, and it was really nice there because they have air conditioning. So I just like stood there. I was like, oh, this is fabulous. So
yeah, I need to go back soon, but I have quite a few of my ebooks and my physical books, so I'm like holding off for now. Plus, where I live is kind of becoming a little bit of a hot spot. So
you guys are. You're kind of spiking up there.
A little scary. That's what happens when you have a former wrestler as a mayor, y'all. So.
Oh gosh.
Can't make this shit up.
Yep. Nope. Just a reminder, we are still running our contest, so make sure and leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, and follow us on Instagram at Caffeinated Crimes Pod. And as soon as we get 50 reviews and 100 followers, we will draw a name from each to win one of our stickers and a pin and a $10 gift card to a coffee shop of your choice. So make sure you go and do that. You can also email us at caffeinatedcrimespod@gmail.com. We're starting to get a few listener emails in, and we love those, so please keep them coming. We love to hear from you guys.
And support us at patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes. We do have a new Patreon that we need to give a very special shout out to, because it is the wonderful, amazing Teresa, who is my mother.
Thank you so much. We love you, and we appreciate you more than you know for so many reasons.
Yes. More than just the Patreon subscription.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, she was like, I need your help signing me up. And then, like, as soon as it was done, she was like, I get a pin and a sticker, right? She was like, where's my pin?
Where my goodies?
I promise. It's coming, Mom, I swear.
I don't know. So we have our monthly Q&A session on Patreon, but I'm kind of scared. I don't know what kind of things your mom's going to ask us that we have to answer truthfully now. So.
Oh, no. She's like, what really happened?
Yeah.
Junior year of high school.
You don't want to know. We'll just leave. All right, so I think that's all we got for you this week.
Yes, so go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.